You hit a wall. You've searched every census, scrolled through thousands of hints. I know what it's like clicking all those green little leaves on Ancestry. You've typed every spelling variation of your ancestor's name into every database that you can find and nothing. And it's 2 a.m. and you have work in the morning. The parent's unknown birthplace may be a mystery. It's like your ancestor appeared out of nowhere, fully formed, with no past attached to them, except you know that's not true. That's the frustrating part. You know that that's not true. That information is somewhere. I've been there. I have lived there for years with actually one particular branch of my family, and I want to tell you about the day that that wall came down. Oh my gosh, that glorious day. And it cost me $10. So it was a few weeks of waiting, and I had an envelope from the Baton Rouge folks with a Louisiana return address on there. And I'm going to walk you today through exactly what I did and how you can do it yourself, because maybe the document that breaks down your brick wall is just one request away. You're listening to NYTN. I'm Danielle Romero, where we talk about American identity and family stories. Let's get back to it. All right, so let's talk about death certificates. I know how that sounds to most folks. People who are not into genealogy and ancestry, I think they're a little shocked by how macabre our research can be. That's a good word, right? Macabre. And it's true. I'm not worried to be hanging around with dead ancestors in the middle of the night. I'm researching their lives, how they were born, where they lived, where they died. But stay with me. When most people start doing genealogy, they go straight for the birth records, which makes sense, right? You want to know when someone was born, who were their parents, where were they born? That is the natural instinct. But the problem is that birth certificates in our country, my country, I should say, the United States, were not standardized until the early 1900s. Some states did not even require a birth certificate until the 1910s or 1920s. And so for families that were already hard to trace, I'm talking the folks, Black families, Indigenous families, immigrant families, mixed heritage families, a lot of times those records for us just do not exist. Churches burned down. Sometimes they were burned down on purpose. Courthouses flooded. Some communities we know were deliberately underdocumented. So what do you do if your ancestor's birth record isn't there? We gotta work backwards. So here's what I didn't realize about death certificates before I started this. They're not just a record of the end of someone's life. It's actually a snapshot of everything the informant knew about that person's entire life. And we're going to get to that because there can be some issues with the informer. We talk a lot about asking who's holding the pen when we're looking at a record. Who's the one giving the information? That matters. But a death certificate can give you the deceased's full name, including their maiden name, if it's a female, date of birth, birthplace, occupation, how long they lived in the area, their marital status, and then, this is the golden ticket, like insert Willy Wonka music. You can get their parents' names and even where their parents were born. Okay. This often includes the mother's maiden name and sometimes, like I said, where those parents were born. This is what changed it all for me. It really did. So think about what that means. You're not going to just get information about the person who died. You're also getting a window into the generation before them to confirm, right? People who might have been born in the 1840s, before the Civil War, before standardized record keeping of any kind. So a death certificate from 1938 could crack open a family line going back to the 1820s. Folks, this is a big one. This one was crazy for me. Okay, so let me tell you about Victoria. Victoria Julia Simon later went by Victoria Perot. This is my great-great-grandmother. She was Lola's mother. And so if you followed my work for any amount of time, you know who Lola was. This is my great-grandmother, the woman who left Louisiana, moved to New York, changed her name, didn't speak about her past, all of that jazz. So I have been researching Victoria's line for years. I wanted to understand the maternal side for my great-grandmother. I knew the paternal line. I mean, that's really well documented. It's Creole, enslaved Creole, French line, just really, really well documented. I feel like if you have French ancestry connected to the Catholic Church during that time in Louisiana, you got a lot of records. Okay. But the maternal side was more difficult. There was a lot of indigenous on this side, and it got tricky. Okay, it got tricky. And we're talking about her mother, Victoria's mother. So I traced the marriage. I knew Victoria and Alphonse. Those are Lola's parents. They're from Louisiana. But what about her parents? I could not find my third grandmother. I was like, well, I know I have a third grandmother. I know I got one. And we had some family stories, and I'm going to get to that too, where I kind of took what people remembered in the family, and some of it was right, some was wrong, but it kind of helped me figure out what to confirm later. But this is where Louisiana research in particular is going to get brutal. The 1890 census was destroyed in a fire, and I don't mean like a few boxes were damaged. I don't have it in front of me, but I think out of over 60 million people that were enumerated in that census, only about 6,000 records survive. That's devastating, right? It's an entire decade of American families just gone. And so for those of us tracing our Southern families, Louisiana families that are already kind of hard to trace, that census could have been like the one record, right, that filled in the gaps for you. It certainly was for me. So Victoria's mother was just blank in my tree for years. I was building out so far back on every other line, but I couldn't go past my great-great-grandmother. It was kind of embarrassing. I'm like, this is what I do. This is what I love. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I had a suspicion. My family had kind of talked about her mother being named Frances, possibly the name Frances Patty, which sounded kind of strange to me. I knew that she was Hispanic, so I had like an inkling that maybe the name had been tweaked a little bit. I couldn't prove it though. Couldn't prove it. And in genealogy, like suspicion is not documentation. I've got a lot of suspicions, but if I can't prove it, it's kind of just, anyone's guess. I have the right instincts and maybe still building stuff out wrong. I needed proof. I wanted proof. I wanted to know who this family was. And then I remembered advice that a wonderful genealogist named Amy Cross gave me. She's incredible. And she said, when you're stuck, go back to the basics. All right. So she said, you need to get a death certificate for Victoria, your great-great-grandmother. I was like, okay, but I already have all her information. She's like, no. Get it for her and see what that opens up for you. So Louisiana vital records, I'm sure they work a little differently from other states. So it's worth understanding that system before you start. So I'm going to talk about Louisiana because that's where this took place for me. It may be different for you, may be similar. So let me know. But if your ancestor died less than 50 years ago in Louisiana, you would contact the Louisiana Department of Health Vital Records Registry out of New Orleans, and there's restrictions on who can order those. Generally, you have to prove direct descent because it's recent. But most of us doing this kind of work, we need to go way back. We're going way past 50 years. So if your ancestor had died more than 50 years ago, which for most genealogy research is the case, you would go through the Secretary of State's office. So for me, it was the Louisiana Secretary of State. Not sure what it would be for other states, but these are the archival records. It's considered public records, and they're much more accessible. And here's the good news. Louisiana has digitized their death records from 1911 to 1974, so you can search the database for free before you spend any money. You can search by name, parish, by year, but I saw her there. So I saw Victoria Perot was in their database, that she had died in 1938 in Monroe, Louisiana. And the database told me a volume and page number. So I had to write that down. It's going to speed up the request. So you're going to go into this, search for your ancestor, see where they're storing that ancestor's information, or write it down. The volume of the book and the page number that she's on. That search is free. The actual certificate is what you need, and that costs money. And when I ordered, maybe it was like 3 years ago, a certified copy was $10. And I think I had to send a check. I think you could do a money order. I don't know if they accept cash. So that's like the only thing I feel like in this world. I'm like, can I DoorDash you $10? Like, how do I do that? But honestly, totally worth it. Totally worth it. So you download the application from the website. It's just like a PDF. It's called Application for a Copy of Public Vital Records. You're basically saying, can I get a copy of this public record? You fill it out, and you're going to give your name, their name of the ancestor, the day they died, and the volume and page number if you have it. Okay, that's going to help. You mail it in with your check or money order to the Secretary of State. And for Louisiana, that's in Baton Rouge. And then you wait. And you try to forget that you sent it in. It's impossible. Mine took a couple weeks, but I live in Nashville. And maybe they were side-eyeing my request. Some people will get it faster, obviously. But then one day, an envelope showed up with a Louisiana return address. And you grab it and you clutch it to your chest. You say, please, God. And then you open it. Okay. So I want you to understand what it felt like for me to hold this document. Now, I don't have the original. This is a certified copy of a record from 1938, so it's 86 years old. And the original document was filled out when Victoria died. It was filled out by her husband, Alphonse, my great-great-grandfather. So every field on this form is as close as I'm going to get to this woman who I've never met. And so at the top, it said, Louisiana State Board of Health, Bureau of Vital Statistics, certificate of death. It gave her name, her address, her age at death, which was 66 years. She was born around 1872. So we're going to get information from, probably before the Civil War. And then I got to the fields I needed. Her father's name was listed, Albert Simon. And that part wasn't totally new. I knew her father had roots in San Antonio and Mexico, and he was Hispanic. And so I got the father's birthplace, and it said unclear there. And my heart sank a little bit. I'm like, okay, the informant didn't know that happens. I actually already knew that though. So it was nice to just see that this was confirmed. This was my third grandfather. This was his name. And the death certificate is only as good as the person providing the information, right? Blank fields can be frustrating, but then field 15 came. Mother's maiden name. You guys. It said Frances Patty on there. There she was. Now, that's not her real last name, okay? But that's the woman. We're gonna get to that. But the woman I had suspected for years that my great uncle Dani had told me, he was pretty sure that it was Frances was her name. It was confirmed in an official government document in black and white. Now, I have to pause here because this is the part where the detective work does not stop. It will shift. So you have your ancestor, you get their death record, you can see information about their parents. I see Victoria's mom spelled out as Frances Patty, P-A-D-I-E. Okay, that's spelling. I was immediately like, Because something that years of genealogy have taught me, names get mangled, they get anglicized, they get misspelled by census takers who are writing down what they heard, maybe through an accent they didn't recognize. Patty I knew that was not the legit old school name, but I looked at it. I had a suspicion that it could be Padilla, P-A-D-I-L-L-A. That's a Spanish surname. And I went looking for Frances, but I couldn't really search Patty because Patty didn't show anywhere. That's why I couldn't find this woman. That's why I thought Frances Patty didn't exist. Every variation that a clerk could have scribbled, I started searching. And this is why genealogy is so much like detective work. I had to do Padilla, Padillo, Padilla. The records are not going to give you a clean answer. I used to think if there was just if I just had this record, I would know. I was like, no, you're going to get that. And now you have more work to do. But sometimes we have to try to hear the original last name underneath the misspelling. But when I looked at field 16 on this, it said the mother's birthplace, Texas. Okay. This was so shocking. I may have yelled. I mean, my husband knows how into this I am, but he doesn't know all the details. Someone's opening up a death certificate from 1938 and yelling. It's like, are you okay? I have been searching Louisiana records for years for Frances Patty. Church records, census records, archives. The whole time, Frances Padilla was living in Texas. She's born in Texas. So this document didn't just confirm my third great-grandmother's name. It redirected the entire research strategy. It opened up the Texas records for me, Spanish colonial records, Republic of Texas stuff, early statehood. And I was thinking, and I was correct, with a surname like Padilla, I'm looking at Tejano history. I'm looking at history I had not even considered yet for my family. This was $10 and a few weeks of waiting. And my brick wall, it broke it down because this opened up so much for me. I was able to find my connection to the Choctaw tribe and Choctaw Apache community of Ebarb in Louisiana through this line. And it was incredible. It was incredible. So I want to help you apply this to your own research because I don't want it to just be a story about my family. I want it to be a map for you to use for yours. So step 1, identify the generation where you are stuck. Who is your Victoria? Who's the ancestor where the tree stops? You have them, but you can't get any further back. It's like they don't have parents. Name them, write them down. That's your target. Step 2, find out when and where that ancestor died. So check the census records. Were they alive in 1930, 1940? If they disappeared in between the decades, maybe they died in that window. You can do find a grave, search newspaper archives for obituary. I did that. You need a death year and a location before you can go any further in finding their parents. Step 3, figure out who would hold those records. So every state's different. Some states are all digitized. I wanted to have the hard copy. I just had a feeling there would be more information on there. That's the mail-in request. And some people have restrictions on recent deaths. So maybe do a quick search, like whatever your state is, like California death certificate, genealogy vital records, and it'll bring you to the right place. Step 4, search before you spend your money. Okay, so because most states do have the digitized records to confirm that the record exists. So make sure you have a volume and page number to know that you're going to get a record. The worst thing is to get your hopes up and then get an envelope back and it's just like, sorry, dude, we couldn't find it. Make sure that you have that volume and page number if it's available. It speeds up the process and confirms you're going to get the right ancestor. Step 5, just order that record, pay the fee, and wait. So a few things to hold on to while you're doing that. The information on a death certificate is only as good as the person who provided it. Look at who the informant was. It's listed on the form. Now, a spouse or a child is more likely to know the deceased parents' names than like a neighbor or a hospital administrator. I've definitely had them give wrong information too, though, okay? But if the informant was a child, ask yourself, how much could they have actually known? Sometimes the informant did not know. So you'll see those fields left blank or marked unknown, and that is so disappointing. I am disappointed. But it's still information because it tells you that by the time your ancestor died, their origins had already begun to disappear. That's meaningful and it's part of the story. And sometimes the informant was just wrong. Names get misspelled, birthplaces are estimated. So always treat death certificate information as a strong lead that you still need to verify, right? And even imperfect information, I think, is better than none. A misspelled name is still a name. An approximate birthplace is still a direction. I spent years with nothing, and I was able to figure out Frances Padilla, her parents, her father was Antonio Padilla, and her mother was a Goins. We're going to do a whole podcast on this family. Man, to find out I was connected to this huge, important family that has connections to Melungeon, to Lumbee, to Creole, to Redbone was so exciting. And even if the details shift as I keep researching, I know I have somewhere to look. I have a thread to pull. I have that death certificate. So that's what I think brick wall research really is. I mean, we want certainty. You're probably not going to get certainty, but we're looking for the next thread, right? The next hint. So my challenge for you is think about this brick wall ancestor. I know you got one. Who's been sitting in your tree, empty space next to their parents' names or above them, empty space. Did this ancestor die after 1900? There might be a death certificate that you haven't looked at. Did they die in the state that digitized the records? You could search for it tonight. I highly, highly, highly encourage you, suggest that you get the hard copy for this. It's awesome. And I will post a picture of the hard copy on my Patreon so you guys can see what that looked like. And when you find something, when that envelope shows up and you have a name or a birthplace or a new direction, I want to hear about it. Come find me on Patreon. Tell me about your brick wall break. The community we have there is full of people just like us who are doing this, chasing the same silences in our family tree. I really want us to use each other in a good way as a community. It's exciting. It's exciting to have people because this is kind of a solitary activity in some ways. And it's kind of amazing to be creating a community around that solitary activity. So I'll put the link for a lot of the stuff in the show notes. And that death certificate is still sitting on my desk. I'm stoked about it. To me, it's not a piece of paper. It is my third grandmother, Frances Padilla, hidden under decades of misspellings. She was sitting in a file in Baton Rouge waiting for someone to come looking. And for almost 200 years, she was there, and she finally has her name back. I'm Danielle Romero, and we'll talk soon.